Host,
I think
can
I'll
you give
need
me permission?
to share my screen.
Oh, let me just make you then.
Okay.
Does the share screen not work?
I don't think it works unless I'm the host. Let's see. Oh, nope, we're good. We're sharing. Okay, cool. The only thing that stinks about sharing my screen, though, is that I can only see you all. You're all so small. But thank you so much for having me, Alex and Michelle, and like everybody. Thanks for coordinating this. And Kyle Stern, who's not, I don't think he's on the call tonight, but he's the one who introduced me. So a big thank you to him too. My name is Becca Haupt, and I am both a mindset coach, and I also work full-time at Bucknell University in college admissions. I'm really excited to spend a little bit of time with you this evening talking about a topic kind of near and dear to my heart, which is not just the idea of overall holistic wellness, but also like putting it into action and creating a plan that can work with you and evolve with you and travel with you, not just through your 4 years or whatever in dental school, but also beyond that and throughout the rest of your life. I've been doing this. I hate icebreakers. I'm like the worst icebreaker person, but I've been doing this fun one with some of my students that I saw. You probably saw like a meme about it, but it was, what is the most boring thing about you? So if you want to, either you can unmute if you want, or you can just put it in the chat. What is the most boring thing about you? Fun facts are too hard. So the single most boring thing about you, mine is that I have brown hair, which is not very exciting. Let me pull up the chat so I can see it. And that you're all dentists doesn't count, or future dentists, that doesn't count because you're all future dentists.
This is a hard question.
I was just about to say, I have so many fun facts because of that's like what they ask on every dental school interview. So I'm like ready to go with the fun facts. Something that's boring. I'm just so exciting. No, I'm just kidding. I'm short. I'm 5'3".
Me too. Oh, Michelle likes white wine. Yeah, it's pretty boring. Me too.
Boring.
What else? Can anybody else think of something?
It's like I'm stumped. I have no idea what to say. All right.
And I think it's such a funny, oh, you drink coffee. Oh, and you drink coffee too. Oh, black coffee is actually pretty different. I'm actually a recovered coffee drinker. I used to drink like 3 cups of coffee a day with like loaded up with cream and sugar. I used it to survive. I was actually thinking a lot about it this morning. I don't like the idea of having to be like tethered to something. So I ended up working really, really hard to give it up and to break that kind of addictive behavior. But yeah, no, coffee, especially when you're in school, is the move. Okay, well, thanks for thinking about that. I think it's interesting too, because especially students who are high achieving or going on for a professional degree or going on to medical school, dental school, things like that, you're programmed to, you know, you said like every day is an interview. You're constantly job searching. You're constantly like marketing yourself, selling yourself, and you're just programmed to spit out all the good things. And so sometimes it's interesting to actually think about like, what's just average about me? You know, it kind of challenges you to like use a different part of your brain. So I think that's a good one to do as well. But okay, so let's talk a little bit about what we're gonna cover today. And so my goal to spend time with all of you is to explore holistic wellness and to provide you all with a framework and again, the tools that you can use long after this 30 minutes is over. To spend some time, some significant time assessing your own wellness needs. Because you may or may not know, like I said, you already know what you're really good at. Most people know what they're really good at and they know what they're really bad at, but they don't know what they don't know. And so to uncover and to dig up some of those areas takes a little bit of time and takes a little bit of work. And then again, creating some action steps to move forward. Expectations for you all. I, like, by all means, participate at whatever level you're comfortable with. Feel free to unmute, interrupt me, post questions in the chat. I don't know if there's like a hand raise feature, but like feel free to like wave at me, do whatever you need to do. This is your time. Also, if you're like driving or your camera's off or your mic's off and you're just gonna kind of like be a fly on the wall and just listen, that's totally fine too. So this is all about you. There's no right or wrong way to do this or to spend this time together. And so I want to start by talking a little bit about what wellness is not. And what I mean by that is to think about like what happens and what made me like this wellness expert, which I actually don't even really identify as an expert in all things wellness, but I do know what it isn't, and I know when things don't feel well. And so ultimately I was a high level athlete. I was a figure skater. And I skated for Team USA, and that really dictated almost every single decision I made for like the majority of my like young adulthood and like my childhood. Everything was about physical fitness and level of competition and preparing for this ultimate goal, which I reached of skating on Team USA, which was an incredible experience. After that, I went on to grad school. And, you know, like yourselves, I was a high achiever. I was doing well in graduate school. But it was after grad school, it was right around the time where I started job searching, where I just started to reach this critical level of burnout. I was studying really hard in school. I was doing all of these like internships and externships, and I was working in all these different offices across campus. My master's degree is in counseling skills. And so I knew what it took for me to be healthy and well. I had taken classes on it. I had done all these things, but I wasn't putting any of it into practice. I decided to apply directly on to PhD programs and applied to 6 different PhD programs, and all in one day got rejected from 6 different PhD programs. So it was January of my final year in grad school, and I felt like this big. I had never failed or like lost at such a high level. It felt so high stakes. And then flash forward, I started applying to jobs. I applied to over 100 different jobs. I flew all across the country. It wasn't until I was on the plane to Oklahoma, literally crying, and I was wishing like, please don't pick me, please don't pick me, because I didn't want to move to Oklahoma, that I realized something was like really wrong. If I was getting on a plane and willing to put myself in a position for a job I didn't even want, in a place I didn't even want to live, I knew that wasn't fair to me. It wasn't fair to my partner, who was like, oh my God, we're going to have to move to Oklahoma. It wasn't fair to anybody. And it wasn't working. And so when I got back, I decided I really needed to press pause and I needed to reassess. And that's when I started working with this coach in my life, a former skating coach who's now a wellness coach. And I was talking to her about it. And I really stopped everything. I totally pressed pause on my job search. I was the only person in my cohort to graduate without a job. Everybody else had a job lined up, and I went to graduation and took all the pictures, and I had zero plan. At the same time, it's when I decided to launch my own health and wellness business with Arbonne. And I felt like such an imposter. I knew that I wasn't taking good care of myself. So who was I to go and tell other people to take care of themselves? So for 30 days, I decided to commit to this 30 Days to Healthy Living program. And I decided that I would just for 30 days take care of like feeding myself, eating, sleeping, and just taking the basic care of my basic human needs. I like went total Maslow's hierarchy and needed to take care of those initial things before I could walk into an interview and feel confident in myself and feel worthy of an amazing job opportunity. And so within those couple of days, I started to feel better. I started to have more energy. I started to stand up a little bit taller. And I stopped applying to jobs in Oklahoma because I didn't want to go to Oklahoma. I was more selective of the positions I was looking for. I was more selective of how I spent my time. I was okay leaving the library, shutting my laptop, and calling it quits when I knew I needed to rest. And those were just skills that I had not been practicing for years because I was always on like warp speed. Everything was so fast. It had to get done so fast. And so ultimately it came up with this list of like what wellness is absolutely not. And it's not stress, it's not anxiety, it's not burnout or exhaustion, and it's not impulsive. And so I was not only impulsive in my decision-making, right, getting on the plane to Oklahoma, but I was also impulsive in my interactions with my family, my friends, my partner. I was snapping at people. I didn't like how things were going. I didn't like how I was behaving. And none of it felt good. All of it felt terrible. And it wasn't until I really had to press pause and create a plan for myself that I was really able to come out on the other side and have a better understanding and a better conceptualization of health and wellness. At that point, I had started my business thinking it would be part-time, thinking it would be something that I would do in the meantime until I found full-time employment. But within those 30 days of doing that program and hitting that pause button and resetting, I was able to come to my first interview at Bucknell, and I had this amazing opportunity and this amazing job presented to me. It fell into my lap, but I knew that I needed to be prepared for it. And every single interview I walked into, I wasn't prepared for before. But now that I was putting myself first, I was able to show up for others. I was able to show up knowing my level of worthiness and what I was serving. And so I think for most of my life, especially having been an athlete, I obsessed for a while over physical health, right? I figured if I wasn't sick and I wasn't at the doctor's office, I was healthy. I figured that's what wellness was. And then I started to understand and really zoom out and see that there's so many other elements to wellness that I hadn't been considering. And so I took a closer look at, again, like what wellness was and what wellness wasn't, and all these different elements that I was missing. And so the bad news here is that it does take a lot of work. And the last thing you want to be asked to do when you really have no time to begin with is to do something that's more work. Like, you don't have time for that. And that's what I kept saying too. I don't have time for this. I don't have time for this. I don't have time for this. But the good news is that there's a framework, and I can show you the framework to make it work for you and to make it work in the time that you have. And so this is really the focus of what we're going to talk about today, and what we're going to think about, and what we're going to try to get you to understand in terms of wellness. This is not rocket science, and this is not like a major breakthrough, and I did not discover this wellness wheel. I'm guessing that most of you have already, hopefully, fingers crossed, that you've already seen this. Can you give me an indication in the chat, maybe if you've seen something like this before, or like a thumbs up or a nod? Yeah, Alyssa's nodding at me, thank you. Michelle hasn't seen it, Allison's seen it. Okay, so some of you have seen it, maybe some of you, this is new. Let's see in the chat. All right, Krishma has too. Okay, great. And so when you're working with this broadened idea of wellness and you're thinking beyond physical wellness, right? I spent so much of my time in this physical zone, right? I was going to the gym, I would run a 5K, I was a coach, I would lead fitness classes, like I was well, right? But I was paying no attention to my social wellness, the people I surround myself with. I was paying absolutely no attention to my environmental wellness. I was doing nothing with my financial wellness. I didn't even understand my own bank account, and let alone making sure that I was saving and not overspending. I had no budget. I was not spending any time on my spiritual wellness. I wasn't taking care of my emotional wellness, my intellectual wellness. I assumed because I was a student that was taken care of, but that wasn't the case. And my circle didn't really look like a circle. It was pretty lopsided. And so what I did was I completed this assessment, and it really helped me better understand where I fell in all of these areas. And here I was thinking I was doing so well, and I took this assessment and I absolutely tanked. And it really shined some lights on areas that I was not thriving in. And so what I want to do is, because I do think this is so important, and you're already on this call, you're hopefully sitting in front of your laptop, I want to invite you to spend, it takes about 8 minutes to complete this wellness assessment. It's through Princeton. It's one of the best ones I've ever found. It's one of the best ones I've ever used. I just put the link in the chat for you. And when you go onto their website, there's 2 different ways you can choose to take it. One is you can choose as obviously you're a non-Princeton University user, and you can create an account. It'll take like 3 seconds. It's just your email address, and then they email you a link to complete the assessment. Or if you don't want to give them, and then they never email you again. There's not like a newsletter or anything attached to it. I also have no affiliation with Princeton. I just like to use their materials. Or you can go ahead and use this PDF. And so if you use the PDF, you can score it yourself. You kind of have to do some math. But you can use one or the other. It'll only take like 8 minutes of your time. I timed it myself doing it this morning. And so I want to spend the time doing that now, because I know that sometimes, because this takes work and you've carved out 30 minutes to spend with me now is a good use of your time to be able to get that done. And so while you all do that, let me go ahead and get this back going. I've got some nice tunes for us to listen to, because I hate sitting here and take your assessment, and go ahead and let me know in the chat when you're finished, especially if you have any big takeaways. I'd love to know what you scored the highest in and what you scored the lowest in. So go ahead and take a couple minutes to finish that. results a little bit. Sorry, the tunes have to stop. Hope you enjoyed them. But I want to talk a little bit about especially what surprised you. Especially because so many people sometimes feel like in a particular area that they were doing well, and then maybe they found in their numbers that they weren't doing so well. So does anybody want to share any takeaways or any areas that they were like, oh no, this area needs a little bit of work? Or on the flip side, if you want to share with me an area that you're like absolutely killing it, where are you doing really, really well in?
I found my biggest weakness in spirituality. It's not a side of me I really ever explore. I never defined it much. So seeing those questions was like, oh, like I just don't do these things. So it opened up, it like added a section to my circle because I was like, oh, like I don't know, I was not brought up in a spiritual way.
Yeah, there might be elements of your circle that weren't even there at all.
I was surprised mostly by the physical wellness aspect, because you think of physical wellness, you think, oh, do I work out? No, I must have a really low score in this area. But then you look at the other things that are also part of your physical wellness that you wouldn't think about, like seeing the doctor regularly or eating well. And that's not something that I've ever thought about when I think about my physical wellness. And that was one of my highest scores, even though exercise regularly got like a 2. So
Yeah, oh, that's awesome. Yeah, there's so much more that goes into it than you think. It's not just a continuum where like illness is on one side and wellness is on the other. There's like so many more dimensions. Anybody else want to share anything? All right. And then my other question for you is, how might scoring low in one of these areas impact your role as a student or impact your role as a dentist? Because honestly, at the end of the day, the numbers don't matter. But if you're not taking care of yourself in one of these areas, for example, we can use Alex and his spirituality. If Alex isn't tapping into his spirituality, how could that potentially have a negative impact on your ability as a student? Or if you're lower functioning in one of these areas, how might that show up in your profession after graduation?
So I felt that I didn't really realize the environmental wellness part of things. And I feel like when, they ask the question of like, do you recycle and like things like that, I feel like those can be, I guess, a big thing when when we graduate and we become dentists. And I just didn't realize that it was part of wellness, I guess.
Yeah. That's a good point, especially right now when you're thinking about like, I don't know, I've been spending a lot of time thinking about like socially responsible businesses. And I feel like, oh my gosh, I could spend all day researching an item before I buy it because I want to buy it from somewhere that's like ethical and sustainable and all the things. And like, how might you incorporate that into your practice? Like, how could you choose, I don't know, products or tools or resources or support companies or businesses or charities or organizations? Because people, right, your consumer, they want to go to someone that they feel aligned with. And you're going to be able to show up more authentically if you are aligned in all of these different areas. Yeah, so that's a big one too. Anybody else? I don't want to cut off discussion, but I want to keep us moving too. Okay. So I'm gonna just keep going a little bit to talk about some tools and then some resources, and then we'll kind of wrap up and figure out where we go from here. And so I've created 2 different planning tools that I use personally to help kind of synthesize some of this information. And this is where, remember when I said like the bad news is there's work involved? This is where some of that work comes in. Fortunately for you, you've already done the work of assessing and finding the data points, right? Because without the data, there's really nowhere to go from there. But now that you have the data, now that you know and you have the answers of what areas you need help with and what areas you might need support in, there's 2 different wellness planning tools. They're the same exact thing, the same exact content, but they're different in their delivery. So the PDF is a lot prettier. I use an iPad for notes, and so that's what I would recommend for that. Or you can use a Google Doc and create your own copy. And so I'll go ahead and put both of these links in the chat for you as well, so you can just see what they look like. And then we'll walk through them pretty quickly just to make sure that you all understand how to use them. And then this is where it's really going to take some work on your end to carve out time in your days and in your lives to spend some time using these different tools, and finding a way that works for you to use these different tools. And so we'll take a look just real quick at the PDF here. And so it's a wellness planning kind of workbook for you to walk through these 7 different dimensions. You can record your scores from these different dimensions. And then there's some general reflection questions on the overall assessment. But then there's a page for each of your dimensions. And so the way I like to frame it is I create a short-term goal for each of these areas, a long-term goal for each of these areas, and the why behind it, which that's when you can really ask yourself, if I don't improve this area, what is the consequence? Is there a negative consequence, right? For not improving this area? For financial wellness, if you are struggling financially or you don't have a good handle on your financial health, what are the negative implications of not bettering yourself in that area? And so what I do in the way I use this, whether you're using the PDF or whether you're using the Google Doc, you can go ahead and record your answers and then record the date on the cover of this. I do my short-term goals in like 3 to 6 month kind of increments, and my long-term goals in like a year or even outwards of like 2 to 3 years for long-term goals. And then what I do is I have it on my calendar every 6 months. I take the assessment again and I update my wellness plan. And so you'll see that maybe one of my physical goals is right now, I'm actually working on a really arbitrary goal, but I'd like to be able to run 5 miles. So that's one of the things that I'm working on right now. And so when I update it in 6 months, maybe I have to reassess. Maybe I don't need to run anymore, but maybe, oh my gosh, I actually haven't been to the doctor, or I haven't been to the dentist, or I haven't been taking good care of myself. And so that's how I kind of reassess and track. And sometimes I open this document and I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot I set that as a goal. And so for spirituality, I've been practicing a lot of meditation, and for, in each of these areas, whether it's environmental or I compost now. That was one of my first projects for my environmental wellness, which has been a lot of fun. And I have a plot at our local community garden. And so they each build on top of each other, right? Step 1, explore environmental wellness. I decided to watch a documentary in each of these areas. That was really easy for me to do on Netflix. But it's going to be really important that you find time to do it. And so I want to real quick talk about the time sensitivity aspect. I just want to show you one of my all-time favorite videos. I think I'm the only person in like the wellness coaching world that admits like a full-blown obsession with jelly beans. Like they're my thing. I love them. They're on my desk. They're in my house. They're like all over the place. Those are my jam. And so I just think this video, I don't know if anyone's seen it before, but it frames time for us, or it helps me conceptualize what time means, especially when you're in this phase in your life as a student where you're so busy and you do have limited time. And so this is real quick, but I think it's worth the walk.
These are roughly 28,835 jelly beans. I counted out 500 of them and used those to weigh the rest. In this pile, there's 1 jelly bean for each day that the average American will live. You might have more beans in your life, or maybe less, but on average, this is the time we have. Here's a single bean. It's your very first day. A special day, but kind of a rough day on everyone involved. Add 364 more and you have the first year of your life. Now, for a sense of scale, here are your first 15 years, 5,475 days, which brings us to the threshold of adulthood. And at that moment, this is the time that we have left. And this is, on average, what we will do with all that time. We will be asleep for a total of 8,477 days. If we're lucky, some of that time we'll be sleeping next to someone we love. We will be in the process of eating, drinking, or preparing food for 1,635 days. We'll be at work, hopefully doing something satisfying, for the equivalent of 3,202 of those days. 1,099 days will be spent commuting or traveling from one place to another, maybe a little bit more if you live in LA. On average, we will watch television in one form or another for a total of 2,676 days. Household activities, like chores and tending to our pets and shopping, will take another 1,576 days. And we will care for the needs and well-being of others, our friends and family, for 564 days. We'll spend 671 days bathing, grooming, and doing all other bathroom-related activities, and another 720 days will go to community activities like religious and civic duties, charities, and taking classes. After we remove all those beans, this is what remains. This is the time that we have left. Time for laughing, swimming, making art, going on hikes, text messages, reading, checking Facebook, playing softball, maybe even teaching yourself how to play the guitar. So what are you going to do with this time? How much of it do you think you've already used up? If you only had half of it, what would you do differently? What about half of that? How much time have you already spent worrying instead of doing something that you love? What if you just had one more day? What are you going to do today?
All right, and while that video makes me like a little sad, I hope it helps illustrate just that we don't have that much time. And so like, if you're stressed and anxious and all those other words that I put on the very first slide, like if you're stressed and anxious and burnt out and struggling, there's not enough time to spend your time struggling. And so if there is something that you can do in this wellness planner, there's an area of your life right now, today, that needs help. The number one thing that I want you to know is that there's people who want to help you, first of all. And if you don't think there are, I'm one of them. We'll talk about ways that we can do that. But yeah, there's a lot of people and there's not a lot of time. And so that's one of the biggest things I think for me and my experience and my experience in graduate school is that I just put off everything and I just didn't think, I'll handle all that later. I'm a student right now. It's supposed to feel like this. It's supposed to feel shitty. It's supposed to feel burnt out. It's supposed to feel exhausting. I'm supposed to wake up with no energy. And I question now, especially that I'm on the other side of it, maybe it doesn't have to be like that, right? And maybe it could feel like being comfortable in your own skin and waking up with energy and listening attentively to others when they're speaking, rather than sometimes if you find yourself listening and you're already like thinking about the things you have to do later. You can be a better friend, a better partner, a better student, a better dentist in the future, all of those things. And so I hope that this creates some level of action. And so when we think about action and like accountability, the thing I like to think about is make a commitment, make it public, and make it happen. There's nothing that motivates people more than telling someone you're going to do something and then not doing it. I can't even tell you the number of times that I have written a blurb or an abstract for a presentation before I made the presentation. Or I have done something before I was ready to do it, but by making it public, I then had to do it. You have to then do that thing. And so I don't know how often this group meets or if this can be a place for accountability for you, or whether you have a roommate or a friend or a sibling or a parent or someone else in your life that can serve as an accountability kind of partner. Or I hope that when we get off this call, the first thing you all do is look at your calendar and put on just 30 minutes to spend some time working on the planning part of this. Maybe even before you go to bed tonight, so you don't shut off your computer and totally forget about it. And then the part that I'm excited about is, we only got to spend 30 minutes barely, and I know I'm over time, together to work through some of this. But what I really do is I do this 30 days to healthy living coaching program where I get to spend 30 days with you coaching one-on-one and unpacking each of these areas. It's a program that's grounded in nutrition. I coach on the first Monday and the third Monday of every single month. I've taken dozens of students through this program, physical therapy students, engineers, college students, graduate students, doctoral students, new moms, people in all different walks of life. And it's great for busy people because I know that you don't have a lot of time in order to commit and do the work. So we do it in a way that's really streamlined and works around your schedule. And so I definitely want to invite all of you to join me in that, whether it's this month or later on down the line. I'd love to be able to work with you more one-on-one. And I'm also happy to offer each of you a 15-minute one-on-one within the next month if you want to follow up on this conversation that we had today and you want some one-on-one time to unpack your answers and see whether or not you'd like to work together. So I want to also just leave you with how to stay in touch. Certainly you can find me on social media, and I'll drop the link to my website in here for you too, just so that you have that as well. But thank you so much for having me spend some time with you all today. I've really enjoyed it. I hope you got something new out of it or maybe learned something new. I'm happy to kind of stick around, I guess, if you have any questions. And my website there is how you can book some time with me if you want to get 15 minutes on my calendar. Happy to do that at no cost for all of you. I appreciate your time. But thanks, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
We really appreciate it. I know it's hard. Wellness is a very abstract, I guess, term, and I was really interested to see how to make it tangible, which is why I was really interested when Kyle told me about you, and this definitely lived up to and went past my expectations. So thank you very much.
Oh, awesome. Well,